Hey guys, I'm Shayda and today we are working on our hand lettering, illustration, layout, and design skills with our May calendar page. So let's get started. Alright, so here we have our usual supplies. I've got a piece of 200-pound cold pressed watercolor paper. You can use anything above 140, you probably don't have to stretch it. And then I've got my grid of numbers here, which I've done on graph paper. And I've got my scissors and washi tape, mechanical pencil, a little bit of graphite transfer paper. And then the first thing I'm going to do is just cut off a little bit of that paper, and I've done this in other tutorials. I'm using 9x12 sheets, and I just want them to be a little more thin, and just so they have that nice long look of a calendar page. And now I'm just going to sort of make sure my grid and my months are sort of centered on the pieces of graph paper that I've written them on. And that way I can easily tape them in the center of my watercolor paper here. If you feel like I'm going a little fast, you might want to go back and watch some of the other calendar pages, but I'm just doing our usual where I cover the grid of numbers in graphite from my pencil. And that allows me to transfer that without any smudges from that graphite transfer paper. I just find with something as delicate as the numbers, it's better to transfer them with a little bit of pencil. And then you can use your transfer paper for the larger elements like the month title and the illustration that we always add. So I hope that makes sense. It's up to you. You can use graphite transfer paper, or you can use just graphite from your pencil on the back of your page, or you can do a combination of both like I'm doing here. And then once I've transferred those elements, I just remove the sheets and I go over my transfer with my Pigma Micron pens. And here what I'm going to do is I'm just going over my transfer with a little bit of pencil so that I can see it. And I'm not adding an illustration in May the way we normally have done in March and April. What I want to do for May, since May flowers, I just want to add some fun watercolor flowers. And I've done this sort of mixed media floral illustration on the channel before, but here's just one more sort of application for it. So I do this by simply getting my watercolor discs nice and wet, and then I just take a brush and I just lay down these fun, easy splotches of color. So here I've got my pink paint and I'm just sort of throwing down a circular form that I'll illustrate later as a flower. And I'm adding these very warm spring colors for May. I'm using a lot of yellow and orange and some sort of dark navy blue to ground the color palette. And you can see here I'm just not overworking the paints. I'm just sort of splashing some color on the page. Remember, any areas of the page that you get wet, that's not going to bleed out on its own. Colors will only bleed into each other if they touch each other. You can see that happening on the left there a little bit. The navy and red have touched and they're sort of bleeding into each other. You can take a dry brush and sort of fix that, sort of erase a little bit of the paint. But any color splotches that you lay down, you can always add more water or more color and it will remain in the area that you've painted. It's not going to bleed out onto dry page. The water sort of creates its own contained area, or the wet area is a contained area. I hope that makes sense. But anyway, I'm just keeping it really easy, really fun, and I've got a nice sort of warm color palette. Now you might be wondering how I choose my color palettes when it comes to doing pieces like this, and I don't think I've mentioned this on the channel before, but I am a synthesette, or I have synesthesia, which is a sort of cross wiring. I'm just going to sum this up real quick. A sort of mixed up wires in the brain where you associate colors with musical sounds, or in my case, I see all my letters and numbers in color. So when I look at a book or a newspaper that is obviously black and white, each letter has its own color, and those colors are stationary. They never change. So A is always yellow, and B is always red, and F is always blue, and I is always white, and S is always light pink, and X is always sort of purpley black. So I do find that sometimes when I do a piece like this, where there's a word like May, and May has its, very defined colors. So M is orange and A is yellow and Y is a light purple. So it's got these very, very warm colors, this beautiful peach and yellow, and that really affects my decision making when it comes to colors. So you can see in the color palette of the flowers here, I've really gone for basically the colors that are in the word. And actually, maybe I'll do a video where I go more in depth about this whole synesthesia thing, but you guys should Google it for now. And if you'd like to hear more, comment below. All right, and then once I'm done painting, I'm going to make sure that my painting is 100% dry. So I've got all these great splotches of color. I've set them aside. I've let this dry overnight, but a few hours should do it. It's always good to check the back of the page and just make sure that it is bone dry. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my Pigma Micron. I've got a few sizes here. I'm using the 03 and the 05, which are sort of the medium-sized tips. The 03 is sort of my Goldilocks, my perfect Pigma Micron. And I'm just going in and I'm, designing these flowers. So I'm taking my splotches of watercolor and I'm turning them into floral illustrations. And I'm not worrying too much about where that paint is on the page. I don't mind if the color sort of leaks out of the illustration or if the color doesn't fill the illustration entirely. I'm totally not worried about that. I'm just using these splotches of color as a sort of map, a rough map for where I will put those flowers. Now, if you want more information about illustrating flowers and leaves and berries, I have a couple tutorials about that, and I will link those in the description below. But what I'm doing here is just using some of my favorite floral illustrations and creating these very simple, easy flowers. This is one that I do again and again, and it's sort of the spiral rose where you spiral out from the center, and then you add these cute little petals and you turn your little spiral into a sort of English rose. And I will link that video tutorial about watercolor roses in the description as well. And I do like to do some of the illustrations just where there is no color and just have some sort of black and white sketchy bits as well. And then once I'm done with the flowers, I'm just going to take my pen, my Pigma Micron, and go over that May. And the reason I didn't start there and fill that in with a pen is just because if I did drop a bit of water or something onto it, I didn't want it to bleed. So now that I'm done with the watercolor, I can go back in confidently with my artist pen and just fill in my title. And I'm going to have this gorgeous mixed media floral calendar page that is all about May flowers. Thanks so much for watching today, guys. Please hit that subscribe button if you enjoyed the tutorial. And don't forget, feel free to share these videos. Help me grow my channel. Thanks so much, and I'll see you later.